James Hill.
Shaun Ryan, how you going,
Good, mate. Welcome to the podcast.
mate? Excited to be here.
Yes. So you're in branding,
I am.
brand strategy to be precise, the thinking part of what leads to a visual identity and outcome for a business, etc. How'd you get into that?
I think I was always creative, or always had a passion for creativity. So even from school, back in the school days, was into graffiti. I went to a school where the kind of main path that people went was sort of law or medicine or finance, but I definitely didn't fit that bucket. So maybe there was like a little bit of rebellion going against the grain. And then went to uni, did design there. And then, worked in a few small design studios, worked in a branding agency, and then ended up leaving that and starting a design studio with a friend. So, that was sort of my foray into it. Always loved anything aesthetic and creative. But over time, I think there's been more of a, commercial aspect to what I like that I believe brand can kind of release for businesses.
Yep. We've had a couple of conversations around what brand kind of is, because it's one of those real subjective things to a business. Like, my brand's fine, I have a logo type thing. Whereas it's much bigger than that. How do you navigate those conversations with business owners when you know that you can help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, honestly, it is a little bit tough sometimes. The fact that maybe I find it difficult to articulate the full value of it. I can only imagine how difficult that is for people who have, no real experience with brand. I mean, ultimately, I think it's a bit like your personality, like your business's personality, and just like your personality, it shows up in lots of ways. It shows up how you do your hair, the glasses you wear, the clothes you wear, how you talk, what you talk about. What you find interesting. All of those things make up your personality, and your brand's a little bit the same. It's not just one thing, it's a whole heap of things. It's, I mean, your logo plays a small part in that. It's the name of your business, it's the colours, it's the tone of voice, it's, the type of marketing you do. It is how you actually operate your business and what your beliefs are as a business. So it is, I think there is a huge amount of things that make up your brand, and sometimes that's that's a lot for a business owner to get their head around, especially when they're already trying to navigate so many other parts of their business.
Do you think it's something that gets not taken as seriously as it should?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for a long time, if somebody said, "Oh, you're a graphic designer," I almost saw that as a little bit of an insult internally. I never said it to anybody, but I did. I was like, I feel like that kind of minimizes what I do. And look, that's obviously my issue to deal with. But yeah, look, I believe that brand has a huge part to play. I mean, all you need to do is look at somebody's watch and go, does a Rolex or a Tissot do anything dramatically different? No, but one you'd spend, I don't know, $1,000 on, and one you'd spend $50,000 on. So if that doesn't sort of tell you how valuable brand can be, then I don't know what does. But I think, the other component to that is a lot of people think that maybe brand is for big businesses. And then so they're like, well, I'm not a Rolex, right? I'm a small business. We do accounting. Like, we don't need to do that. All we need to do is a good service and treat our clients well. And my thinking is, well, most people have that perspective, and most people aim to do that as well. So that's the bare minimum. If you can then add a really great brand on top, all of a sudden, you've got a really strong way to differentiate yourself against all the competition.
That's a pretty good way to articulate what a brand is.
I'll never be able to say that again.
Well, we've recorded this, okay, so you could just go back and reference it. When you are in amongst people and you go, I'm a brand guy, and people sort of go, oh yeah, you're a graphic designer. Yeah. Like that, and I just got my logo redone, and I love purple.
Yeah,
that's what I always say.
You've heard my client conversations, have you?
Yeah. What's the biggest sort of faceplant moment that you kind of always get, where you're like, oh, here we go again? Like, this is, how do I make people understand the importance of this?
I think, yeah. I mean, look, I have lots of conversations where somebody goes, oh yeah, we rebranded last year, and you look at what they've done, and you can tell that it's really just been a logo change and a color update and a slight modernization. And part of me goes, you really haven't got the value out of branding. Like whoever you've worked with, they haven't done what a rebrand should really do. And then the other part of me gets a little bit annoyed because it's like, that's why they don't have a great understanding or respect for brand, is because they've probably worked with somebody who hasn't done their brand justice. So yeah, I mean, there's frustration, and you don't want to kind of, and it's also hard to tell somebody that what their outcome looks shit. As much as I would love to, and be like, you know what, that's not a good brand. Like whoever you've worked with hasn't done you justice. Obviously, I can't say that, but I can say it here. But yeah, look, I think
it looks like you're trying to drum up business for yourself by being negative. Yeah. Like, that's no good. I could do better. Well, why would you do better? How would you? And then you've got to go, well, you got to pay me to do that. It's like,
yeah, exactly. And I just, look, I mean, I think there's, probably more bad than good branding agencies out there, or a lot of maybe, small design studios that call themselves a brand agency, but then they don't do all the strategic thinking and then follow that through into all the brand outcomes to kind of back it up.
Yeah. So strategy, I think, is a bit of an overused word. It's sort of thrown against the wall as sort of we're kind of going in that direction, and that's our strategy. So it's a bit of a misnomer, whereas strategy really is you're here, you want to get to here, and what are the touch points in that we've actually got to nail down for it to work. And I've found that the whole creative process, when you kind of try and talk about a strategy on top of that, which is quite an objective process, albeit there's subjectivity to it, it gets lost on a lot of small to medium business owners as to why you do it. So what is your answer for why do a brand strategy?
I mean, I think it's like going on a road trip without a map, right? Like you might end up getting to your destination eventually, but if you have a bit of a plan on how to get there, you're more than likely going to get there a lot quicker with less problems along the way. I think your brand strategy is exactly like that, right? You have a perception for how you want your business to be seen by your clients. You have an idea of what makes your business unique and special compared to all your competition. But unless you actually put that into a plan, it's very hard to execute that across all aspects of the business consistently and on message. So it just gives yourself a structure to work towards and a clear vision for what you stand for. I think, more often than not, myself included sometimes, that if you ask somebody, what's unique about your accounting firm? More than likely, if they haven't gone through a brand strategy process, they'll say something pretty generic.
Yeah.
Or, we have great client relationships. We're really good at what we do. We've been around for a long time. And it's ultimately, that's like what everybody says. So how do you find a way to articulate what you do, which there is something unique and special about every business, just like there's something unique and special about everybody's personality. And if you can kind of get to the center of that and make sure that that resonates with their audience, then all of a sudden, every touch point, every messaging, every discussion that they have with potential clients becomes so much more impactful.
Yeah, I would agree with that's the goal, trying to find that little kernel.
Yeah.
And then it grows from there. Yeah. Something Great is your company. How long have you been running that for?
So this iteration, we're entering our third year.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned before, I've run a design studio before, always been very entrepreneurial, have done a few other things along the way, which, have given me a broad range of experience. But ultimately, brand is what I'm really passionate about, what I love. And I do believe that, it has a big impact on businesses, big and small. And, with the impending doom of AI, I think brand's going to become more important. I think AI is raising the bar of average much higher. So, just being good is not going to be good enough anymore. You need to find a way to really connect with your audience, on a human level. And I think that's what brand can unlock.
And Something Great, do you have a specialty around a business type or size or where they're sitting in terms of how long they've been around?
Yeah, I would say we specialize with mainly founder-led businesses. I think that comes more from the fact that I've started a number of businesses and I can resonate really strongly with founders and the position that they're in. They tend to have, been around, I don't know, maybe you could say 5 to 10 years, and they've gotten to a bit of a natural plateau with their, I won't call it a brand, but their logo and their look and feel that got them to where they are today. And then they have a realization, we still have these, strong growth objectives, but what we've done to date's not going to get us to the next level. So that's where we like to come in and then use kind of strategy to unlock that growth opportunity.
Mm. And you mentioned AI, which is just everywhere now. Are you seeing it as an opportunity, or are you seeing it as a threat?
I mean, I think you have to see it as an opportunity, right? Like seeing it as a threat's not going to change anything. Look, I think it's amazing. I use it daily. I think, as a business owner, you'd be pretty mad not to, unless it was just really against your values and you were willing to live with the consequences of not utilizing it. More power to you. But yeah, look, I think it's got the ability to unlock, a whole new level of insight and output out of business owners. But there's also a lot of things to be wary of with it as well. Just the mere fact that you can look on social media and it's very hard to believe a video that once upon a time, if you saw something in video, you'd be like, yeah, that's real. Well, now you don't know whether it's real. You don't know whether the person talking to you is real. And I think that those lines are going to get a lot more blurred.
A lot more blurred. Do you think that's a problem, or is the outcome all that matters? So if you have a really emotive video, and we're seeing these sorts of things where people are trying to manipulate someone's feelings towards a particular, how they want them to feel.
Yeah.
Which is marketing forever.
Yeah.
All the commercials forever has always been that kind of trying to get an emotion, elicit an emotional response. If it's done artificially, but with the same intention, is it still disingenuous? Is it still...
I mean, I love this question because I've had this chat and I think it's a super philosophical chat that you can go down many rabbit holes, and I'm certainly not the person to have the right answer. I think there's a big unknown on that. I don't know what I don't know what human beings will be willing to accept, and whether AI can replicate that and, put out the same emotional get the same emotional reactions. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a big question mark in my head whether it can do that or not. I'd like to believe that we will always need that human connection and that it can't be replicated by machine, but I think time will tell pretty quickly.
We are probably going to be our own checks and balance there, because if a company comes out with a blatant, like you see it sometimes, they've got the fingers are all wonky.
Six fingers, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like the backlash is enough to sort of make them go, okay, we're sorry.
Yeah.
So we are kind of, as consumers, a bit of a checks and balancing there. But I'm like you, I see it as a big opportunity. And it affords, let's say, a small to medium business owner all these tools now to create content, to create messaging, to get their name out there in a far more streamlined, easier way, provided they have the right strategy, right? So again, coming back to that little kernel of an idea as to this is you, this is why you're unique, and this is the framework and the guide rails for you to go and put yourself out there. And now there's all these tools to help them do it. So I think what you said earlier around average is just going to be raised really high. So, what does great look like in the future? And you said, I think rightly so, that brand is going to be really important. Why do you think that? Why do you think brand? Is it because it's kind of I won't put words in your mouth, but why do you think brand is going to be super important now when we have all this access to all this new stuff?
I think brand is a way for people to connect with something. So if you do it really right, if you do it really well, it unlocks this really kind of emotional thing that you connect with. Like with shoes, people, might be like love Nikes, but other people love New Balances. And sometimes they don't really know why, but that brand has done something really well to resonate with that audience so deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, if you can achieve that as a business, and I think businesses big and small can do it, then you are going to connect with your audience better than anybody else. If you can connect with your audience better than anybody else, then, you've got a very defensible, you're very defensible against your competition. You're ultimately solving a problem. So you're doing good in that person's life to a degree. You're building your business while you do that. But if you can't, really strongly resonate with people, and there's more information and data and more competition than ever, then I think it just comes, it might come down to price or luck of the draw as to whether somebody picks you. I think that's like a dangerous strategy for a business to have or rely on, is, just, hope that somebody's going to pick me over the competition, versus going, I really know what we stand for. I know we solve a problem. I articulate that with our audience, and they then resonate with that articulation.
Mm. So let's say you're a small business owner that may see this and they're thinking, do I need a brand strategy? Like, I agree with what he's saying, but I don't know where I fit along this line of sophisticated to having no idea. What's your answer to that if someone's sort of thinking, do we have the right brand?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that they don't know is the answer, right? Like, if they don't know where they sit along that line, that's exactly the problem. So I think if you're out there going, I don't know, do I need it or don't I need it? Then you probably need it. I would almost say unless you've got one and unless you're really proud of it and it's working really well for you, you need it. So yeah, I think the easy way to work out whether you need it or not is to firstly go, do we have one? If you don't, you need it. If you do, is it working and do you believe in it? Then maybe you don't need it. But all other cases for me is you need it. It's going to help you significantly.
Yeah. And how do they know it is working? How do you know that a strategy you had done? Two-part question. How do you know it's working, and how often should you revisit it?
Great questions. Look, I mean, I think there's, data metrics like website traffic, conversion rate, incoming leads that you can measure, internal morale and culture. I think is a really great reflection of whether your brand's working or not. A lot of companies that I've worked for, done brand strategy and branding for, one of the outcomes is that they become like a desirable place to work because they've got really clear values and a clear mission that people can get on board with. And then the people already working there are really proud to work there because it's really clear what they're working for. And then there's external feedback as well. Having, a lot of the rebrands that we've done, the clients will get comments, quite frequently around how much they love their brand. If you're not getting that sort of feedback, then there's nothing there to love. And people are probably, they might be picking you because of your service or because of your great Google reviews or because you've been referred by another client, which are all really important things. But I think it's about that ultimate goal of like having something that people emotionally resonate with. And if you can do that, I think that's the highest form of, connecting with your audience.
It's a very good foundation to build on. Slight change of tact here. What was the thing that made you want to leave the studios you were working with and go and start your own thing?
Look, I think it's just a personality profile thing where it's like I just didn't get enough satisfaction out of working for other people. I always, I think I grew up with, quite in an entrepreneurial family. So a lot of the people that I looked up to ran businesses. My cousin, runs a successful marketing agency. Shout out to Tim from Fuel. I think, I aspired to do that as well. So it was always part of my vision, something I wanted to do. And every time I worked for somebody else, I just didn't find it as satisfying. I think running your own business is bloody hard, as I'm sure you can attest to. So it's certainly not all roses, like not working for somebody, but there's an immense amount of pride can come from working for yourself around, solving problems and what it takes to actually build a business that's successful.
What is something that you would you go back 4 years ago and have a conversation with James of 4 years ago and warn him about things that are coming, or would you let him fall over?
I fall over 100% every time. I've had, lots of things not go right in my life. Look, not nothing too dramatic, but, I suppose the plan and vision that I had in my head as a young boy didn't necessarily come to fruition many a time over. But more often than not, no matter how hard the period that I've gone through, over time, I look back and I really, enjoy that period. And I'm really grateful of going through it. I would say the hardest times that I've gone through are the ones that I look back on and I think of really fondly. That's a critical part of growing. Whether you run your own business or not, like falling over and learning from that is the most important part.
So what advice would you have to someone who might be in strategy? Maybe they're in design or they're in that creative world and they can think through a problem, they like it, they think they're good at it, they'd like to give it a shot. What's your advice to someone that...
Give it a shot. Life's short. Have a crack. I think you're better to live with a mistake than regret, right? Like, I think just do it. Life's too short to worry too much about it. If you think you can do it or you even unsure but you want to give it a shot, just do it. You learn so much along the way. I just think, I don't know, school maybe raises you to think that there's one way to approach life and that, you should try and avoid making mistakes. But I don't know. I don't think that's reality. I think, everyone learns best from the mistakes that they make. And it gives you a much richer life, like sometimes the safe path, the easy path is not as fulfilling.
Yeah. How do you calibrate your brain from being on the tools? And because strategy is a very thinking job, like there's always wheels turning. And when I'm thinking through stuff, that's when I feel fatigued, like it drains my battery. But if I'm doing something creative, I find it's less draining. I haven't done a huge amount creatively for a long time, but how do you reset? What do you do to reset your brain?
I mean, I try and avoid getting on the tools. So I also think I default to strategy far easier. Like I love doing strategy. I think my brain processes like that, and it always has. So I think it would be the opposite for me to some degree, where I find design draining. I think I find, I get a lot more fulfillment out of watching somebody else do great design than trying to do design myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another reason why I don't, I like running a business, because I get to work with great designers and watch them crack the code. So how do I switch out? I don't know if I've got any sort of special tricks or anything that I do. I think, sometimes just stepping away and then, giving yourself a bit of a break between context switching is really important, whether that's going for a walk or just having a breather. I don't know. I don't think I've got the best method, to be honest.
A consistent theme amongst people I've spoken to is exercise and rather than the other ones. And Dan, who was in here a couple of months ago now, he did a 12-hour walk.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Everyone does love that idea, and I think I do too. But man, you'd have sore legs after that.
I don't know. I saw that the other day, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, geez, I think I'd love going for a walk for 12 hours. Look, I'm sure 6 hours in, I'd regret it. But, I think like Steve Jobs used to do things like that, right? Go on these weekend retreats. I think there's a little bit of LSD involved there. But
just a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know whether Dan did LSD on this 12-hour walk. I don't want to speculate, but and you certainly don't need to do it. But I think, stepping away from everything and giving yourself time to reflect is really important. I definitely don't do it anywhere near enough. I do meditate.
Okay.
That gives me short little snippets of, that kind of, spending time on myself without devices, trying not to think too much.
And is that just letting your mind wander? Because the whole meditation thing, which I've done as well, is you're supposed to kind of relax but it's very hard to switch your brain off. So you hear people say, "Oh, just just daydream,"
Yeah.
and that's a good thing to do. I think everyone sort of finds their own kind of meditative thing.
Yeah.
For some, it's sitting there watching TV that they're not actually taking anything in, but the brain is just kind of emptying the junk bin
Yeah.
a little bit.
Look, I definitely do that, right, with TV as well. So I'm not criticizing that, but I think that's a little bit different to meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're still having some sort of cognitive stimulation. And I think the idea of meditation is to try and have less cognitive stimulation. I think the goal of meditation isn't to do it right. It's just to do it.
Yeah.
It's to try and work with it. So sometimes I'll have sessions where I do kind of almost zone out into like a little bit of nothingness. More often than not, though, I've got like thoughts coming in, and then I just try and I don't want to get too woo-woo, but try and let those thoughts kind of pass without giving them too much attention. So I think, look, there's a lot of different ways to meditate, and there's a lot of different ways to switch off. But I think where you have so many things coming at you all day long, especially with your phone, having kind of nothing there. I reckon you'd be much better to go sit in a park with nothing around you, and not even try and meditate, but just sit there for a couple of minutes than you would be to sit in front of the TV.
Mm. How long do you meditate for?
Normally 15 minutes. I try and do it in the morning. I think it's a good way. I was getting into really bad habits, waking up, looking at the phone, scrolling, getting emails, and then that was starting to I'd have these reactions from the minute I wake up. If I got an email that, wasn't great, or if I saw something on social media that made me feel whatever, it was pretty much, I felt like I was programming my brain for the wrong thing from the minute I woke up. So now I sleep without my phone in the room, and then the first thing I try and do is 10 to 15 minutes of meditation.
Just set yourself up for the day.
Yeah.
And that's working?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, it's not a perfect, it's not a silver bullet, but I think if I do it, my day almost always starts better. And even the most minute thing of feeling proud for giving yourself 15 minutes before anything else, just to, slow down and meditate and whatever, have visualizations or whatever you do, I think that alone has a lot of nice impact. I think it works more often than not.
Where do you see, we touched on the rise of all this technology a little earlier. Where do you see it going? I mean, it's pretty hard to predict an end game for any industry. And there's a lot of anxiety around it's going to take my job, all this sort of stuff. And there's arguments for that threat and also the opportunities around it. Do you see it as someone like yourself being able to do more with less and leveraging all this tech to bring in other things to complement what you do, whereas it's not going to ever replace your experience? Being able to do that for that company, they were here, you did your thing, and now they're here, and that's a success story. Like, it can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't say it can't do anything, because I just think there's too many unknowns. So I wouldn't be as naive to say, oh, it will never be able to replace me. It might be able to. I'd like to think that it wouldn't. And, I'm resourceful, and I think I'll find a way no matter what AI throws at me. I think the more likely outcome at the moment is that it's just a really great tool that can support what I do. But who knows? I always think creativity and I don't know. I think the brain is a hard thing to replicate. And there's so much nuance in life. There's nuance in dealing with people, and there's nuance in how I solve a problem versus how you solve a problem. And I think that nuance is what makes us human. And I'd like to believe that that'll stay around and be valuable.
Yeah, I think it's going to really push the community aspect of humanity a lot.
Absolutely.
I think that's going to actually come back because of I don't know exactly what's going to be the catalyst, whether this is an existential threat to our livelihood or whether it's so disruptive or whether it's so positive or what. But I tend to think that the conversation now is just always around AI and how it's impacting a life, my life. So-and-so cut 13,000 jobs. So what does that now mean? And I think it's actually going to, I see a future where there's going to be a lot more micro businesses that are sort of powered by AI with several hundred clients, doing enough that the people in it can live rather than massive companies with 200,000 people in them. I think that's going to be shift down, which means there's going to be a lot more of a need for a differentiator, I suppose, when you have all those little micro businesses and you need to appeal to certain people. So I don't think the strategy thing is going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to believe that because that's sort of what I've kind of, positioned my whole business around.
Yeah.
I do think that idea of like community and, face-to-face and physical environments will become a really big thing, which I love the idea of. I think anything that brings humans together in the same place is, a positive thing generally. And I'd like to say that, like, I think, social media has probably done the opposite, right? Where it's made it easier to stay in touch, but you're not really staying in touch and you can stay in touch from afar, and it has, some good uses. But yeah, I know bringing us back together, human connection and being face to face, I think will be, could be a really positive aspect to, what AI might trigger.
How do you see there's always a sort of feast and famine thing for, I suppose, all small businesses and maybe even all business. There's a feast and famine argument you could make, or maybe not for the Microsofts, but certainly for people our size, etc. So how do you deal with that as some advice you could give to another creative agency owner and probably applicable to a business owner? How do you deal with that anxiety of feast and famine, like great month, and then next month it's like, shit.
I don't know. I wish somebody could teach me how to deal with it better. It's hard, mate. It's honestly like, I think that feast or famine cycle and, not necessarily knowing where the next project's going to come from and having overheads that you have to pay regardless is one of the hardest parts of business to deal with. I don't want to go back to meditation. We've already covered that topic, but I do use that as a way to kind of manage that stress. My family, my kids, realizing actually what's really important and realizing, I've got a great life and focusing on the things that are really important and valuable. I think sometimes it's about where you focus your attention and energy, and there's always going to be something negative to focus on, but there's also almost always something positive to focus on as well. So I think, being really conscious around where you try and put your attention. And I know it's hard, if cash flow's low and bills are coming in and, you stress, and I do it as well, but you don't generally have your best problem solving moments when you're in that kind of scenario. So I don't think that's actually a helpful way to get through it. So yeah, whatever it takes, go for a swim, 12-hour walk, do LSD, spend time with your family, whatever works for you.
You heard it here.
You heard it here, exactly.
James Hill, do LSD. That's
say,
one snippet you take from this.
You didn't have to say my surname, mate.
Oh, I introduced you at the start. So, no, I agree with that. You have to really, it is a choice. And sometimes you will gravitate towards the gravity of a negative thing that pulls you in. And it's really hard to flip it to the positive, even though when you take context of what's going on, anyone. And for me, it always does come back to I'm healthy, my family's healthy, we have a roof, there's a lot to be kind of grateful for. And that's a problem that I can deal with, and all that kind of thing. That's how I try and choose to look at things when things get a bit weigh on you a bit. How do you see collaboration versus competition? Because I would say maybe it's because I'm in this world as well. There's a lot of agencies out there, a lot of creatives. There's 9,000 in the country, and that's probably going to go up with the rise of, like we were saying before, you can do more with less. You could effectively build out maybe a small team and you're at the tip of the spear and go and do some creative work. So the amount of people that are going to need work versus who can do it and do it well. How do you see that? How do you see competition, collaboration? Are you a competitive, this is mine, stay away? Or are you like, we could probably partner up on this, work with this, or,
I'm just working out which answer I should go with. Look, I would say I'm kind of competitive by nature, but certainly not to the point where I think this is mine or I have ownership. I'm more competitive in the way that I go, if somebody else is doing well, I can do well as well. That's kind of how I look at it. So, I do have, like an element of competitiveness to me, but not to the point where I feel threatened by other, studios or agencies. And also, if it's the polar opposite, right? I find comfort in talking to other studios and agency owners. And when you see somebody doing something really cool, like, I think that's awesome. Like, so I certainly don't feel threatened. I think, I think that's like an ego thing, right? If you're feeling threatened, that's about ego, and you need to deal with that personally, because the reality is, there is enough out there for everybody to get a feed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do your job as well as you can and provide value, then ultimately you should find success in doing that. And that's something that only you can control. That has nothing to do with other studios or agencies. You run a branding agency, and we're here today chatting, and like, I'm loving it. And every chat that we've had, I always find, I never think, oh God, like, I wonder what, if I can get some, competitive advantage against you or anything like that. I just find it a cathartic experience to speak to somebody else who's, going through something similar. So look, I think being competitive is healthy, but be competitive against yourself, not against other people. If you're collaborating, is a great way to kind of get ideas from somebody else, feel heard and seen by what somebody else is going through as well.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole point of this is I agree with you. And I think that creative, and I say this, agencies, creatives, because I'm in that world, should be supportive of each other. I think there's no reason to not be, which is kind of the whole purpose of why we started this podcast and started interviewing people like yourself, was get their stories, because I'm sure that you have stuff that you've done and gone through and will continue to drill into that someone listening to this will go, that's exactly what I'm going through now. Okay, I'll try what he's just said, or try what she just said, because that's probably going to help. So let's get into some of the nitty gritty stuff. When you have a real problematic client, we all have them, how do you deal with that?
That's a good question. I generally find that problematic clients start with the qualifying. I don't think I'd like to believe that they don't become problematic, that maybe they weren't the right fit from the start. Generally, that's what I've found, is that a problematic client has come down to there not being a good fit from the get-go. We've definitely had problematic clients out there, but I wouldn't say there's been a huge amount of them, but what they've all had in common is misalignment from the get-go. I think that's, not to bring everything, well, I suppose the point of this is to bring everything back to brand, but that's again what brand strategy can help you with, right? Like, if you've got a really clear positioning, then you know who is for you and who is not for you. And if you just work with people who are for you, then you really minimize the chance of having, those client relationships not working. So whenever I've felt like there's a really good kind of symbiotic connection with a client, it's almost always worked out really well. And they've left, loving the process and loving the experience, and vice versa. We've loved the outcome and loved working with that client. So I think it's about being, selective with who you decide to work with.
What if you really need to make budget?
Yeah, well, I've been there, mate. I've been there many a times. I mean, ultimately, you got to keep food on the table, right? Yeah. So, like, it's all good and well saying, "Hey, just work with people you like," but the reality is, sometimes you got to bloody pay the team. And I think, in those circumstances, you've got a hard decision to make and go, will this, is getting this revenue going to help the business, in the kind of the greater scheme of things? More often than not, when I've made that decision, it either hasn't been profitable, or I haven't got the outcome that we, would like to get and leverage into other business. It's kind of almost more often than not, almost not been worth it. But yeah, who am I to tell you not to take business?
When you're in the need for it, and it's 6 months later or 3 months later when you work out, you've lost on that job, plus the time you put into it. It's like, but hard lessons learned. It sharpens you, I suppose, in some way, shape or form. What are the tools of your trade when you're in there doing your strategy? Are you Adobe? Are you a Figma? Because there's a million out there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Figma. Figma's amazing. Adobe, I would say, is a necessary evil. Sorry, Adobe, but I mean, you're a pain in the ass sometimes. We do use Claude and ChatGPT. We use Productive.io for our project management. Google Docs, that's kind of like makes up the main suite. Slack as well.
Yeah. Okay. Adobe, if you are listening, we are looking for sponsors.
Drop your subscription.
The opinions of James Hill do not reflect the opinions of this podcast. No, they are. Well, they're a big acquisition tear, I think. Old Adobe, just if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah,
type thing. And we
comes
from
lack of innovation, I reckon.
Well, they had the monopoly for so long. The guy who started Adobe, I learned this the other month, went to uni with the guy that started Pixar.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that alumni, and there was a few others in their class of whatever, all went on to do computer science. I think that was a degree in the, I want to say, very early on. Someone's going to call me out on this. Late 60s, I think, early 70s, getting off topic here. But yeah, Ed Catmull went and did Pixar, and then the Adobe guy did Adobe.
I want to go to that uni.
Yeah, at that time as well. Because I was hearing on a pod yesterday that a lot of the whole way that Pixar does their stuff, which now is pretty ubiquitous across the board, Ed Catmull's got patents on it. So I think he gets royalties from all this new animation stuff that comes out. Yeah. But he pioneered it. Creativity Inc. actually is the book.
Oh, yeah.
If you have want to read the Pixar story, it's very... Because I'm going to tie this back in, so I sound like I'm really clever. I had a really good point, but I've just thought of this. They were bankrupt. Sorry. They were circling the drain for so long, Pixar, from the mid-'80s when Jobs kind of came on board. He was just funding them, trying to get rid of them. No one wanted them. They couldn't see the end game for this computer animation. Like, it's not going to replace hand animation, because you think about late 80s, early 90s, Disney's still pumping out Aladdin. They're still pumping out really good hand-drawn stuff. Lion King, which was sort of probably around about the same time Toy Story dropped. And so the whole book is him going through getting to the release of Toy Story. And then it's just changed the whole world. Not just for them, but for everyone. And if you think of the creative thinking that went into that story, because Pixar's got a really good track record of great stories, and their writers and the way they would think through a problem as a group, they spent that time in the strategy of like, what is the story? And then the animation and all that just flows through. So it kind of shows if you do the thinking properly, you can have that outcome that is really, really good. How good was that tie-in?
Yeah, there you go.
I was just thinking on the fly.
Expert at work there. Found a way to like loop it right.
Thinking on the fly. So you got to get in front of clients and pitch to them like, where am I going? Yeah. Shit. Yep, that's it. I'm landing there. And they were brilliant. Wonderful. I don't think I really had a point to all that.
Doesn't matter.
Other than you can kind of, you never know, irrespective of your size and what you're doing and the innovation, you can still get to these levels where it's not that you're owning the world or an industry, but you're just really well respected at what you do, and that's kind of the goal. You want to have that reputation.
And I mean, Pixar ultimately, like, obviously they were an animation business, but ultimately they told amazing stories, and animation was, you know, the means of telling those amazing stories. So I think, you know, yeah, at the heart of it, like if you can tell a great story, even about your own business, then people resonate really strongly with that. You know, they engage with that idea, and it's they also find comfort in a great story because it kind of follows generally a bit of a similar arc where, you know, there's a hero and there's a guide, and you know, there's a problem and there's an outcome. So yeah, I think they do that, you know, very well. Obviously, in a very, very creative way as well.
Why do you think that is? You mentioned that people buy into the narratives. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a familiarity to it. There's a comfort that comes from a story. You know, if you read a book, you have an expectation that you're not going to be left with, you know, the story kind of not all tied up. You know, it's going to get to kind of a conclusion. You know, you might go through some hard stuff, but ultimately you're going to come out with a bit of an answer in some way. So I think there's, you know, there's a huge level of comfort to the idea of a story, and it gives you, what's the word I'm looking for? But, you know, confidence around, it gives you certainty. That was the word I was looking for. It gives you certainty and doesn't leave you with ambiguity.
What's the hardest lesson you've learned in running something great?
What's the hardest lesson I've learned? I think business is just way harder than you think it's going to be, you know, and even though I think, you know, as most business owners have a level of, you know, optimism, and you need that to obviously create a business, because if you weren't optimistic, you certainly wouldn't give it a crack. But I think, you know, things often are way harder than you think they're going to be, way slower. You think that what makes you special ends up being harder to communicate. So, yeah, I think just, how hard and kind of lonely it can be at times is probably the hardest lesson that I've learnt. You know, I founded something great by myself. We were chatting before the podcast, you know, there's some great elements to running a business by yourself. But there's also some really difficult elements where you don't have that other person to necessarily bounce ideas off, or, you know, when you have a shit presentation, you know, there to kind of make each other feel better. So there's like, you know, lonely moments. There's moments where you feel, you know, it's obviously not true, but nobody else understands what you're going through. You know, you've got a lot of things that you're processing through your head that nobody else on the outside world has any idea of what's going on. You obviously don't want to let your team know of the stresses that you're going through because you don't want them to kind of worry. So, yeah, there's, you know, a lot of isolation at times. But then I think things like this, you know, and, you know, we go to Cub and talking to other business owners is really important. It's like that critical part of connecting to somebody else who's actually going through something similar and having that cathartic experience of, you know, going, oh, you know what, Shaun's actually, you know, going through this or been through this and come out the other side. So, yeah, it's that would be the hardest lesson. But then on the other side, doing stuff like this, I think, is the answer to that lesson. Is, you know, not going inside yourself, which is really easy to do, and actually putting yourself out there and chatting to other people.
Yeah, get out there and meet people.
100%.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. This is a question I really like to ask people. What can the today version of James do that tomorrow's James is going to go, thank fuck he did that?
That's a good question. What can the today version of me do? I mean, go to the gym. That's always a good one. I know it's not business related, but yeah, I think almost always, even when you can't be bothered, going to the gym is always a great thing to do. That's something tomorrow James will be thankful for. Have a good night's sleep is something tomorrow James will be thankful for. Not avoiding things, not avoiding the hard things. I think tomorrow James would thank me for, and facing those things.
Because he doesn't have to face them.
Yeah, exactly. That's old James had to do that. Historical James had to deal with that problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I think those things are all things that people potentially try and avoid, but their future self would thank them for.
Yeah, your first response was look after your health. So gym, sleep, you meditate, obviously. I'm going to assume you eat pretty well, all those things. Because they're the unsung things that kind of keep your brain less foggy, and you can make better decisions and you can be better across the board.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like running a business. I don't see how you could, but it would certainly make it a lot harder if you weren't in good physical shape, because I think, good physical shape to me also impacts your mental health as well. So it's nothing to do with just your physical, how physically healthy you are. To me, that is a direct impact on your mental health as well. So yeah, I mean, exercise, eating well, not drinking too much, getting a lot of sleep, critical components of me doing my job well. Generally, if those things are a little bit off, like, you pay the price for those within your business.
Yeah. What's next for something great? What's on the horizon for you guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we want to continue to utilize AI to the best of our ability. I think it's important to sort of stay current with that and keep adopting and keep learning and keep exploring with it. You touched on, community and in-person events. I think that's like an interesting kind of direction I'd like to explore in one of the previous iterations of the businesses that I ran, the design studio I mentioned. We did a lot around environmental branding, and it was something I was really passionate about. So I think kind of looking into those kind of physical spaces could be something really cool to do, that also becomes super valuable for businesses. Things where it kind of takes you away from the digital realm and into the real world, but still has a brand experience. I think that's somewhere we'd like to explore.
Cool. Well, we look forward to seeing more of you out there.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed that. It was great.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
See ya.